Hi everyone. We're gonna give a few more minutes so people can trickle in, and we will start at the hour shortly. So I guess it's not noon for everyone everywhere. It'll be different time zones, and if there's suppliers joining in, then yeah, the nature of supply chain is that it is pretty global.
People can sit in on their lunch breaks
Lunch breaks or dinner breaks.
or dinner breaks.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of a delay, so I think everything should sync up.
Awesome. Have you been following any climate trends lately?
Always following climate trends, but I think there's a lot of news or events happening recently that too many to follow. Let's say that. Probably the one that I've been following the closest is the Canadian Climate Week.
Yeah.
We're of course a part of the Canadian Climate Week, so there's some bias there. But what about you?
No, I think firstly on the Canadian Climate Week, it's an exciting thing, obviously with the Climate Weeks. Second. Okay, should be good now. Just had some feedback. But yeah, anyways, just to talk about Canadian Climate Week, I think it's something honestly Canada should have done a lot earlier. I would think so, because I think Canadian values are so like neatly tied into what climate risk is and how people are getting affected, and if anybody's an ethical business, right, like it'll be the Canadian people that will be building those businesses. So I think it's a great opportunity to market and rebrand Canada, honestly, because you have the London Climate Week, you have the New York Climate Week. The stuff that happened during the New York Climate Week last year was, let's say, controversial in any regard, with the UN happening at the same time and the US administration kind of like rethinking what it thinks its role is in global politics, I'd say. But I think Canadian Climate Week, I think, is here to stay. It'll be the first one, and hoping to do my best bit to give it a good
Is this the first Canadian Climate Week?
It is the first time, yeah. It's the first time it's ever happened, and then hopefully this will be a yearly thing, and we'll be able to get people from all around the world to come, be in Canada, in a safe space, talk about climate opportunities, talk about what they're doing, and spread the knowledge.
What kind of events were they hosting before the Canadian Climate Week? I remember there's still being something in Toronto in the past couple of years, but
so there's always been events by organizations, like industry groups, I would say. So we work sometimes with the Canadian Lenders Associations. They've been doing the Sustainable Finance Summit. It was mostly geared for the financial markets in Canada. But now Canadian Climate Week is pretty much all industries, and obviously with all the supply chain turmoil, a lot of people are looking at climate as a way out, which is interesting than what was the case beforehand.
Are you still expecting it to be pretty finance heavy? Or I feel like when I see finance heavy events, it always seems pretty disconnected from the grounds. Like you were mentioning earlier, I don't think Canadian businesses needed a Canadian Climate Week to do what they're already doing. What are your expectations for this one? You'll be attending as well, right?
I'm speaking at a few events, hosting another webinar during it, but I'm usually like the antagonist on these panels. Everyone I think has obviously somebody has sustainability in their title. People will think that they're talking about sustainability in general, but what they're really talking about is what sustainability what they're allowed to talk about sustainability in the context of their company and their business. And obviously people aren't really going to share their open thoughts, but me being a founder, I think I'm always just trying to provide a fresh perspective that you can do a lot more with a lot less. And when talking to bankers, especially or finance bros, as it's most commonly known, there's always this talk about financial materiality. Okay, there's a bunch of this.
Maybe you should explain what that is for the regular audience.
So financial materiality would be like something that's material to my businesses, either making money or losing money. And then sustainability somehow, from the people with sustainability titles,
should be tied into it.
But they would say that it is not material to somebody's a business's finances, and why should the bank be taking on that risk of
common question.
Yeah, very common question. And hopefully this webinar is one of many things that I'll be talking about at those panels on how it is material to business. And, I mean, me and you have seen this over the last 5 years, but I mean,
over and over.
Yeah, nobody went to university for this stuff. His professor was going to give them real world examples. Like, it's just stuff that wasn't happening 10 years ago. Universities, I'm sure, will teach all this stuff 10 years from now. But it's always the gap in between where the businesses that take opportunity before it goes mainstream, or
that's what I was going to add is I feel like people have been or have started to go to school for this stuff.
Yeah.
But those people are not all the way at the top yet. If you look at the C-suite executives or the people in charge, let's call them, that generation is still not the generation that didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Because in our work, I still find heads of sustainability or mostly in the millennial generation that have actually gone to school for this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you can speak on this too. But often, or majority, to be honest, they don't have any decision-making power, and they call it head of sustainability, but it's a team of one. There's no one under them.
It's a bodiless head. Anyways, I think I agree. I think there's a crop of millennials now that is rising up in seniority in the corporate ladder. They are the ones asking questions, creating opportunities, and distinguishing themselves. And I think what they're doing right now is what will earn them those C-suite promotions. The people who sit on those roles right now have earned their bread and butter from things that they've done before. But I think the millennials are taking climate as one avenue that they could distinguish whoever they're working for, and rise to the top.
For sure.
Okay, I think we are at the hour clock, so we will officially kick it off. Before we kick it off, just a quick disclaimer that this is not legal advice. Omer and I are here to share our knowledge working in this space over the last 5 years. We've worked with suppliers and big brands all over the world. That's the nature of supply chains, right? Like, you may be selling something in Denmark, but the materials that are used to sell that thing are being produced in Africa or Asia, and the factories in North America, or the warehouses in Antarctica. Like, these are the type of things that we've dealt with over the last 5 years, and we're hoping to share our knowledge just for the benefit of those who are willing to avail this kind of stuff in their day-to-day business thinking. There's many perspectives we'll be going over, and we hope that this information is something that you'll be able to create more awareness for within the companies that you work at, within the people that you surround yourself with, because that's the battle that we've been fighting, right, Omer? Anything else you'd want to add?
No, I think the only thing is this is supposed to be a webinar not just for the suppliers. I think, like Abdullah was saying, this is a very interconnected supply chain. So wherever you're sitting there, hopefully you'll find something useful in this webinar if you stick around.
Perfect. Well, let's kick off with some more context on who we are and why we're a good authority to talk on this subject. I'll introduce myself. So I'm Abdullah Chaudhry. I'm the co-founder and chief impact officer of Arbor. There's a long pitch there on why I created Arbor, why I see a world in a very different way, but I'll leave that to the contents of this webinar. That should explain to you why Arbor is the way it is. I'm pretty passionate and motivated to eliminate barriers of entry for people from all backgrounds, businesses of all backgrounds, to participate in a more trust-based, data-based relationships when they are looking at sustainability within their supply chains. And I'll pass it on to Omer.
Thanks, Abdullah. I'm Omer. I'm the data lead here at Arbor, and I manage most of our key accounts. So I work very closely with most of our clients, all the way from the initial kickoff to supporting them throughout their sustainability journeys, whether that's their first time ever doing reporting, or they're some advanced users and they're looking more towards decarbonization and how to make sustainability a part of their, how it affects their bottom line. So today, I think hopefully we'll talk about both perspectives from both the supplier side and the customer side. And we're gonna try to have some fun with it, I think.
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier, right? It is the purpose of this webinar to be able to engage with people who work in these supply chains and there's always this arm's length distance between a supplier and the buyer, and the suppliers buying
Way
from
more,
somebody else. More than arms length, a few continents maybe sometimes. Language could be a barrier, culture could be a barrier, but at the end of the day, these business relationships exist because that's the nature of supply chains. And that's pretty much why we built Arbor, right? Was we really, really believe that everyone has a role to play, a simple role to play. And if we stop treating it like a telephone game where information gets lost at every part of the supply chain, then I really, really believe that it is going to affect your bottom line a lot more sooner than what the media or the public knowledge on this subject would let you believe. So pretty excited about sharing our success stories and our failures as well.
Yeah. Why don't we go over what we're going to be covering at a very high level, and then we can dive right into it.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think everyone has heard customer is king, or customer is always right.
Different variations of that.
Yeah. In different languages, we'll say it differently. But it essentially all means the same thing, right? When it comes down to your customers, right? Your political opinions, your family values, your personal beliefs, right?
Countries, regulations.
Yes, regulations, or whatever that thing is that you may have a take on. Whenever a customer says something, that becomes priority number one.
Nothing else matters.
You can keep that take in the back pocket, but if your customer is asking for it, and if you know that is related to the customer success part of your business, then that's the one core fabric of every business that they cannot have like personal opinions, redirect those in any way. So firstly, we'll talk a little bit more about what those intents are, why they are the way they are, why they used to be different, and how they've learned from those mistakes now.
And where they're going as well.
And where they're going, exactly. And the information we'll be sharing are based on real world examples of working with suppliers for large global brands, working with large global brands that are engaging their suppliers. And this exchange that exists in the market is so important, because without that, nobody can actually achieve decarbonization, right? What do you think?
Let alone, I think decarbonization, people get often scared of that word. But, I often don't bring that up in the first few meetings. I think really depending on where you're at, right? If you're very early on in your journey, I think it's super helpful to just get a baseline. And then once suppliers and customers feel comfortable exchanging that data, like you said, that's where I think they can both collaboratively figure out, okay, how do we reduce this baseline impact, and how it can actually help them, not just as a as a checklist item, but get more business or protect the business that they have with their current relationships.
I know this may sound like what you can get new customers with carbon data. You can win more customers. That's not what your consultant's going to go over during a webinar. So hopefully this isn't going to be another boring slideshow, but you'll be able to hear from our real world experience that the market is dynamic, the market is moving, suppliers are winning bids or losing bids, and carbon data has become a strong component of that.
And it's happening today, not in 5 years.
Yeah. Climate change is happening today, everyone, just so you know. And the decisions around your business is going to affect it today as well.
And I think we're going to end with success metrics, if you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I want to paint a picture of what success looks like, right? This is not all kumbaya type of a mindset, right? We're not going to come and talk about from an idealistic point of view that, we all have,
personal reasons
or responsibility to save the environment and the world, right? Like I said, your personal opinions are your personal opinions. This is just to show how the market fundamentals have shifted, how, different engagements and different decisions are being made today that can affect your business today and for many years to come. So you knowing this information is not necessarily you doing a good Samaritan exercise, but it is actually you being a good business leader.
And it doesn't help if it makes you feel good at the end of the day too. That's a nice to have. Cherry on top.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll finish it off with a live demo. We'll walk you through from step one. When you first get that email from a supplier saying, hey guys, I need this data by tomorrow, give it to me right now. all the way to showing you what that data looks like at the end. And hopefully you'll be able to use the learnings from this webinar to be prepared if you haven't gotten that email yet, because it is coming.
It's coming.
It's right around the corner. I'll pass it off to you, Omer. What do you think people will get out of this?
Awesome. So today, just to start, we really wanted to go over the why, right? So really understand, like Abdullah was mentioning, why are your customers asking for this data? What are they doing with it? And where can you expect these requests to kind of go in the future? And so I think the first thing, it says supplier differentiation, but really what it means here is anytime, and especially if you're a supplier, you'll be very familiar with this process. You'll get a bid and you'll get a tender, and 10 other suppliers are going to get the exact same tender. Now, what your customer is hoping to understand by asking this request from you is if you and the 10 other providers all give a product carbon footprint, they can take a look at, as a customer, if they have 100 suppliers, which suppliers actually, one, can provide this data, can they provide it on time? And then two, what are those numbers saying about how it impacts their own business? So if you're a customer and you're supplying from 100 different suppliers, depending on the carbon footprint of those different suppliers, that's going to affect that customer's own carbon footprint as an organization. So really, they're asking this data from you because they need that data themselves to be able to start doing their own carbon accounting. Now, regulatory compliance is another one, and this one is really dependent on what geographic region you might be in. So for example, if you're in the EU, you're probably already seeing this, especially if you're in carbon heavy industries. So for example, the CBAM regulation, that's one in the EU where if you're supplying steel, cement, these commodities that have a lot of carbon embedded in them, already suppliers are being asked to provide the carbon footprints of this data. Or what they face if they don't have this data is that they have to default to an average number. And when you have an average number, you can imagine that you can't differentiate yourself from the other supplier, from your competitors. And especially when you have an average number and you can't provide your own data, you're also going to have to pay some type of fine associated with the fact that you're not being able to provide this data.
Just to stop you there, Omer, because I feel like, CBAM is a good example to show people the easiest way to think of it if there was a carbon tariff, right? Everyone knows what tariffs are right now at this point. Is one of the words of the year. But imagine that a market decides to not judge where it was made, but how it was made and how much of an environmental impact it represents, right? So what Omer is saying here is that if you are proactively providing that information, then you don't have the liability or the risk associated on tariffs in certain markets. And then similarly, CBAM is being worked in other jurisdictions like Canada and Australia. And, anybody would always ask you, if you're a business founder, that what is your target market size? And let's just say that if you don't have carbon footprints, then that number really reduces by a lot.
Yeah, especially if you're selling into these countries that already have these existing regulations. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, we talked about CBAM, that's one example, but there's a lot of regulations around Scope 3 reporting that indirectly affect suppliers. So like we were mentioning around the supplier differentiation point, if you're a supplier providing this data, it might just be that your customer needs it because they're under a regulation, and that regulation requires them to report their own numbers, and they can't report their own numbers if they don't have that data from you. And so the last kind of point, and of course there's definitely way more reasons, but just in terms of the top three, more around that cost and efficiency. And what I mean by that is, if you're a supplier of a given product and you're supplying this product to, let's say, the Walmarts of the world, or you're white labeling this product for any of your customers, what your customers also care about, aside from just the fact that you have a product carbon footprint number that you can provide, is what is the cost associated with that carbon footprint? Because what they're doing on their side is they're taking a look at the cost and carbon, and they're comparing that. So the cost to carbon ratio is something that we kind of talk about often in our industry. Maybe Abdullah, you want to speak on how to simplify this idea of cost to carbon?
Yeah, I can simplify it from the point of view of a factory owner, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the major types of suppliers, right, is like somebody who has built a factory from the ground up. I've
Yeah.
met with that same person in Pakistan, in Vietnam, in
Yes.
Bangladesh, in Europe, in North America, right?
Yeah.
Usually they're family-based businesses, right? Like somebody built them
Yeah.
by a lot of hard work.
Yes.
And can you repeat your question? Because I really want to make sure I answer it.
No, really just simplify this idea of cost to carbon,
Yeah.
especially how it relates on the customer side, right? Why do they
Yeah.
care about this idea of cost to carbon?
So I had the same exact conversation, right? Where
Yeah.
the CEO of a company, a supplier who was providing goods worth $500 million to like the top brands in the world, literally asked me,
Yeah.
why are these people asking me for the carbon data 2 years after I gave them the product?
Yeah.
And
That's funny.
why don't they negotiate it at the same point?
Yeah.
And hot potato game that has existed in the world of supply chain where a retailer or a big brand who buys products in large volume would not necessarily negotiate
Yeah.
the carbon footprint and the cost of the bid at the same time.
Definitely.
Because it's not in their best interest, right? If somebody can provide the cheapest price and provides a lower carbon footprint, they're just going to go with them, right? But my message to both the retailer and the factory owner is that if you proactively have the ability to provide that information when you have to bid for that first contract, you have a lot more leverage than you think at that point. You can negotiate from a power of strength. You can leverage that you can provide a lower carbon footprint product. Let's say that product is 20% less carbon intensive than what you have been providing to that brand. You have the ability to negotiate for an increase of 5% of the price. And honestly, in most of the cases I've seen, that is more than enough for the CEO of the factory owner to be convinced that this is a decision baked in business fundamentals.
Yeah, no, great answer. And I think we've both seen that on the supplier side, they're very willing to reduce this footprint.
Yeah.
It's very much on the customer side to communicate that they're looking for both of these things at the same time.
Exactly.
So let's move on to the real world examples.
Yeah. So I think I kind of touch base on like one of the perspectives that exists, right?
Yeah.
If you work for a major supplier, you could be in their customer success team, sales or marketing team, or sustainability team. Depends on how you have that conversation with your buyer. But it could be any one of these teams who could get that email, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to touch base that different teams have different type of biases.
Yeah.
And it is the basics or first principle thinking that will allow them to be on the same page, both from the customer's perspective and the supplier's perspective. So just to be clear, let's say the customer is the Amazons of the world, and the supplier is a mega factory or factories around the world that is owned by one company that is providing that product to Amazon.
Or, sorry to cut you off, or a supplier that's just providing one single SKU.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be
Exactly. It doesn't have to be scaled up yet. I 100% agree. So there are different jobs to be done at that Amazon level. And then there's completely but connected different jobs to be done at the supplier level. And we will walk you through each one of them. And then hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will know what to do once you get that email to a point where the customer can be very happy. And that's the least that we can achieve in this webinar, but we won't be able to get into the complexities of each role and what stops them and what doesn't stop them. But usually the rule of thumb is if it helps your customers stay happy and you can earn more customers along the way, if you wrap the messaging of sustainability data needs around that moves a lot faster.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you talked a little bit from the customer perspective, but on the supplier side, like Abdullah was mentioning, you might get an email and the email might have a request for a product carbon footprint, but alongside that, usually you'll also have a standard or a methodology that they want you to follow, and of course, they'll have a deadline. So we'll walk you through some of these steps, but we really want to show you especially on the supplier side, how simple it can be to respond to these requests, and how it's not just a one-time effort, or you shouldn't treat it as, I'm just going to pay for this one product carbon footprint and move on. Because if you make it a part of your ongoing system to set up the data system, set up the measurement system so that you can provide these requests as needed, that's where we're seeing some of our customers become preferred suppliers, keep their current customers happy, as well as use this data to bid for new projects and new opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So we'll go over some of these in detail as well, but at a high level, I think I really want any supplier out there to understand that this is not just a one-time request, and you really shouldn't treat it that way.
Perfect. Do you want to cover, like, I'm sure you've done tens of these lately, so I think you'd be the best person to talk. And just keep in mind that people listening in might just not know what a carbon footprint is.
Of course.
And, just want to make sure that they can also relate.
Yeah, no, totally. So these are very high level steps. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about each one of them, but I'll just use one example to go through. And of course, if there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we're happy to answer them after. So usually the way that it starts is you'll get an email, and this email could be sent to the procurement team. If you have a sustainability person at your team, that's also another caveat, right? Most suppliers, or especially on the smaller side, they might not have a sustainability person on their company. And so whoever that person is, you're going to get that email. And in that email, you're going to have the relevant methodologies. There's going to be potentially export formats. So how do they want you to send this data over? Do they want it to be in Excel? Do they want it to be in a specific format in Excel? What fields do they want there to be when you send this data over? And of course, they're going to have a deadline for, usually in an ideal scenario, you're able to meet this deadline, but we've often seen that especially suppliers that are not prepared, they end up delaying this process, and maybe they'll send over the PCF or product carbon footprint weeks down the line, and at that point it might still be good for this first time around, but definitely is not helping your case for future bids. And so once you kind of identify what those formats are, what the methodology is, the next step is usually to start collecting the necessary data that you're going to need to measure your product's footprint. And this is very simple data. I always harp on this point because people make it seem way more complicated than it is. It's not data that you don't already have. It's data that you should be collecting already if you manufacture your own product. And so just some very high level examples, especially when we're talking about product carbon footprints, you're going to need a bill of materials. And a bill of materials is a very common line item that most companies that I talk to, whether you're storing it in Excel or some other software system, you should have a bill of materials for your product. It's simple details like your product's weight, details around the utility expense at the manufacturing site. So if you pay a utility bill, if you have a bill of materials, you're 80% there. And that's what I try to communicate in most kickoff calls when I work with suppliers is it's not going to be this big scary thing of collecting all this data that you don't have. Most likely you already have it and we just need to pull it together. And so once all this data is together, the next step is, of course, to calculate the footprint using the data that you've collected. Now, there's a few options here. Sometimes if companies have an internal sustainability expert, that sustainability expert can use the data that you've provided. They can license out some other databases that they might need, and they can totally do it in-house. That is usually only an option for companies where they have that knowledge within one of their employees. More often than not, that's not the case. And so what companies usually end up doing is either going to a consultant or they end up going to another software solution that can help them use the data that they've collected to measure their emissions. On the consultant side, what I've seen is usually companies pay, per product carbon footprint. It's usually hourly. And on the software side, there's a lot of softwares that either will get you to do it yourself. So again, you're in that same pain point of you have a software product, but you need to know how to use it. And then there's companies that provide a mixture of software and support services so that you're getting that end-to-end solution. And all you need to do on your side is provide the data on your product that you should already have. And so,
Which one does Arbor fall under?
so on Arbor side, we always pride ourselves on being that expert support service that comes with our technology platform. So when suppliers come to us, there's no expectation on their side to know what carbon footprints are, to know how to use software platforms that do carbon accounting, and it's an optional step. What usually ends up happening is we'll support them throughout this process for as long as they want us to do it. And there could be a certain point in time where once they also realize how simple it is, that they feel confident asking us to teach them how to use the platform. And that's something that we've seen some of our advanced users in year 2 and 3, where they end up learning to use the platform themselves. And honestly, they end up never talking to us, which works out for me because I'm usually the one, supporting them out in that first year.
Yeah, and just to kind of add a little bit to what you just said there, right? Like, I think what you mentioned about supply chain activity data
Yeah.
is very important for people to take away from this webinar because, you know, what do a customer care how much energy I'm using to
Yeah.
make the product, right? Like, it's a very fair question, right? I'm taking up the
Yeah.
risk, I'm paying the bills. Why do I need to tell my client
Yes.
or my customer, why is it the energy
Yeah.
consumption this much, or this is the source for it, and these
Yeah.
are the materials I'm using, right? And I don't think enough people know this, so that's why I wanted to just stop you and just
Yeah,
kind
of course.
just put some context around the market here. So if your customer has ever said we will be net zero by 2050 or
Yeah.
2030 or any of those type of themes, they've learned that they did not have the data at hand to be able to make that claim. And quite shortly in the new year, Science Based Targets Initiative is launching a new standard called the V2 version. After much controversy, they have updated their requirements, and they're going to ask for assurances and a bunch of other, red tape around what your claim is. But the key difference between the two versions is that they're asking companies, anybody who wants to make a commitment, or somebody's customers is making them make the commitment, whatever that fact may be, that the numbers are based on supply chain activity data, not on some other types of assumptions or financial data or spend-based averages, because they know that you cannot report your progress in a way that you can monitor it based on truth or based on transparency. Because, I mean, I'm sure you can speak a little bit more on that. Yeah.
I think it goes back to that same point you were mentioning around, if you are a supplier providing products to these large companies, they cannot reduce their emissions without you.
Yeah.
And so if you can be proactive around how you provide this data, there is actually some leverage that the suppliers have on the side. How often have we talked to companies where they have, hundreds, if not thousands of suppliers, and their biggest pain point is they don't have data from their suppliers and they don't know how to get it. And I think that's a very common theme across these large companies that we talk to. And so if you're a supplier that can proactively provide this data or provide it upon request, you're definitely sitting in that preferred zone of suppliers compared to any of the suppliers that might get cut off.
Yeah, and there's a more reporting deliverables for the preferred suppliers than the ones that are not. If you end up increasing your sales to Amazon by 5x than the year before that you were doing it, because you're providing carbon data, and it's a journey you're starting right now, right? And I think that's just one thing I wanted to add, was that at Arbor, we like to keep things simple for you with optional complexity. It's a motto that we've used forever, but it's because we understand that people did not go to school for this, and they don't really understand how it connects within procurement or risk or scenario analysis, and why companies do it. And when we onboard you into our platform, we provide you the context as well. We provide you the knowledge as well, and we hope that you'll be able to learn in a manner that is relevant within your own business, that can help you get more customers, that can keep your customers happy. And that's how sustainability becomes part of business in a way that it'll stay here for a while.
Exactly. And I think you kind of already touched on that. Disclosure and next steps is, yes, the first time around might be you sending the data over for one product, but then it's very much an ongoing journey, right? And you don't have to stop there. You can measure your other products. You can figure out how can I reduce the footprint of the products that I'm providing so that I can appear as one of those preferred suppliers to these companies who have publicly made commitments to reduce their emissions, and they really need their suppliers' help to reach the goals that they've set. So,
Amazing. Yeah, and like I said, we'll walk you through some real world examples. So before we go into the software version, Omar, I
yeah.
think there is a part that I really want to touch on that will provide urgency, I feel
Mm.
like, to a lot of those business leaders
Yeah.
within a major supplier.
Yeah.
You're always running on margins. I've talked with several manufacturers about how a machinery's ROI is 7 years,
Yeah.
right? So if somebody buys a new machinery and the machinery is making all cool stuff and all fancy stuff, you're not going to be able to get your return on investment for another 7 years. And then those 7 years, you need a certain amount of production for that
Yeah.
machinery to keep going, right? So I feel like for those people who are always considering these big decisions and they work in an industry that doesn't work on margins but volume,
Yeah.
I think this is something super important to understand, right? So when like every company would have this similar type of a flow. So if let's imagine I am the head of sustainability at Amazon, right, or Walmart, how would I select which suppliers do I need to get the carbon footprint data from? Because imagine, like, I think Amazon's probably has like more like six figures of supplier, like hundreds and thousands of suppliers.
Yeah.
And then each category, I bet, has
Exactly.
tens of thousands of suppliers within it. And it just seems like an exercise that is going to take a decade, right? So like, if I'm that person, if I'm in charge of sustainability, or I am the person working with a sustainability person for procurement,
Right.
how do you make that selection?
Yeah, so great question. And just to kind of repeat your question, it's around, if you're the customer, like how do they decide out of their thousands of suppliers where to start, right?
Yes.
And this is a very common question that we get when we work with customers. And the thing that we always say, again, it's data that you already have that you need to use to make this decision. And the first thing that we always do is you're going to have your top suppliers by spend. So let's say you have 100 suppliers. There's going to be, in this example, let's say 10 suppliers that represent 50% of your spend. So in the Amazon example, let's pick a certain vertical. Maybe there's packaging.
Yeah.
So
lots of packaging
lots
with
of
Amazon.
packaging, right? So if you're supplying packaging to Amazon, Amazon's going to take a look at which of our packaging suppliers do we pay the most money to. And if you are one of the Amazon suppliers that we have a lot of volume with Amazon, back to your volume question, then you already should proactively preparing for this, because what Amazon is going to do is they're going to rank their suppliers by spend within that category. And then they're going to reach out to the top 10 or top 20 suppliers, because those are the suppliers that at the end of the day represent the majority of Amazon's Scope 3 emissions.
Interesting. And just to kind of stop you there, for people who don't know, Scope 3 emissions are traditionally every business's largest portion of the footprint, especially anybody in retail, because that is 99% of your emissions. So if Amazon wants to make a commitment to net zero, it cannot achieve that without its preferred suppliers taking that initiative on heads on, in alignment with Amazon, right? I'm not trying to say like, you go 10 years ahead of Amazon, but if Amazon's ahead of you, then you're likely on the chopping block for their supplier list.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're on the supplier side, you're maybe one of these 10 or 20 packaging suppliers that have gotten this request. Alongside this request, like we were mentioning, there's going to be a standard. Okay, so let's pick one as an example. There's too many to go over today, but why don't we talk about the PACT methodology? So Amazon is at the forefront of one of the companies that is using this methodology. And so if you're a supplier for Amazon, more likely than not, if you've gotten a request, it's going to be under this methodology.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm sure there's different formats and standards that other people are looking for exports in, right? So let's say you're a packaging supplier who provides packaging to Amazon and Walmart.
Yeah.
Amazon could ask and request the carbon footprints in the packed format,
Yes.
while Walmart could ask it in an ISO format.
Yes.
And when you make these decisions, it's very important to select a solution
Yes.
that can take the same data
Great point.
that you have in your business
Yeah.
and be able to generate those formats, or you will then join
Yeah.
the gang that says sustainability is too expensive and it's
Yeah.
not relevant to my business because you're paying too much for something that isn't being used again. But
Exactly.
if you think about the role of this data in your business,
Yeah.
then you need to be agile in being able to export it and be able to get new customers, because if you have that data at hand, you
Yeah.
can use it more than once.
I think just to double click on that point, because I think it's so important, the same data you're collecting for your product, you don't need to collect it again every single time
Mhm.
for different formats, or even, for example, we're of course been talking about emissions today, but the same data is what you need if you're doing more than just emissions. So maybe some suppliers are getting requests for their water footprint.
Mhm.
Whatever solution that you pick, it shouldn't be the case that every time you have one of these requests, you're redoing everything from scratch. Once you've collected the data once, that is the same data that you need for your emissions, for all the different standards that you need to abide by, as well as for what's it called, the different output formats that you need it in.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I think that should give people more context behind why this data is critical to their business, right? People used to say cost and quality
Yeah.
were the two most important things, and I feel like this is the one thing that changes both the cost variable
Yes.
and the quality variable. And if you have a good hold on that,
Yeah.
you can negotiate a lot better. Now, moving on to the next phase of this webinar, let's walk people through a real world example, right? Like imagine I am the supplier or you're the supplier. Let's just say that, and I am Amazon and you're my packaging supplier. I just found out that you're in my top 10 packaging supplier by looking at my spend.
Yes.
Now, I want to make a selection between these 10 on who is going to be, I want to benchmark them first.
Yes.
And then I want to be able to like inform the leaders that these are the suppliers who are already more in line, and you know. And I've just sent out an email, right? Let's take it from there and walk the suppliers through that example. And then yes, feel free to keep asking us questions in the chat, and we'll cover them at the end.
Do you think we mix this in with some of the demo? I think that might be helpful.
Yeah. You know, seeing is believing, right?
Yeah.
So we've been forwarded enough of these emails to know that we know what it looks like.
Yeah.
So this could be your customer success person. This could be your sales and marketing person. This could be your account manager. Whoever's interfacing with the client will generally get an email like this, right? Please continue.
Exactly. So yeah, just to really use a real world example, you're going to get an email that might look a little different, but the main goal is going to be around, okay, you have to collect this data. And if you're a supplier, your first question might be, okay, well, how do I collect this data? What data I need to collect, and where do I need to submit this? So in the video that I'm about to play, this is an example of how Arbor deals with this. So if you're a customer and you have all these different suppliers, we'll do your supplier engagement for you. So your suppliers will get these different emails. And as you can kind of see here, what the suppliers, all they have to do is click on a link that they'll get. And each supplier is able to log into the Arbor platform, where all they need to do is upload that same data that we were mentioning earlier. So you take a look here. This is an example of a bill of materials, like we were mentioning. And all the suppliers have to do is upload this bill of materials to the platform. And on our side, what our platform will do is measure the emissions of the product for you. And so this is a mixture of course, Arbor's algorithm, as well as our human experts. So someone like myself will make sure that all your supplier data looks good as well. And on your side, as the customer, you can jump in to the platform and see those emissions live.
Okay, so just like, stopping there for a little bit. um, I want people to be really clear
Yeah.
on what you said.
Yeah.
Because I know we've been doing this for a while and
Yeah,
we
for
do this
sure.
every day, and sometimes we talk too fast, and we've all heard that feedback. So,
Yeah.
What you're saying here is that you can use your everyday business data
Yes.
when you need to create carbon footprints, right? This is, I'm sure
Exactly.
you've heard this question too. Is
Yeah.
like, I've been in the first. I remember the first early calls we used to do 5 years ago. It'd be like, how do I capture carbon footprint data?
Yeah.
And how do I give it to
Yeah.
my supplier? It in the minds of people, it sounded like, I need to measure how
Yeah.
much greenhouse gas emissions are coming out, and
Yes.
I need like a
A
gas
lot of
meter,
anxiety
right?
around this stuff.
So yeah, if you could just kind of like elaborate a
Yeah.
little bit on that, it's everyday business data, like bill of materials that is being plugged in here, right?
Exactly. So like Abdullah is saying, there's no expectation that you're going down to the factory and you have a sensor and you're holding it out and you're measuring your emissions. It's the same data that you're already collecting to manufacture the product. So you do your cost estimations on your side. So you need to know, how much do I pay for this material? How much do I pay for this material? That data goes into your bill of materials. And that's the exact data that, when you're working with Arbor, will get you to upload either yourself or through your suppliers onto the platform. So very much not rocket science.
You stole that from me,
Yeah.
huh? No, I always tell people this is not rocket science. It only sounds like it because nobody went to school for it, and once you understand it, it is easier than middle school math. So, yeah, don't be afraid of the subject. Ask questions, even like, how do I capture carbon footprint data, right? Like
Yes.
it's yeah. These are the questions we all need to understand if we want to continue working in business and
Yeah.
for the success of the business.
Yeah, and just so in terms of next steps, right? So you have the data uploaded to the platform. Now what? And so you'll have those different methodologies that we've talked about. So that could be PACT, that could be ISO, that could be honestly, there's a lot of different methodologies at the product level. And so whatever solution that you are looking at, what that solution should be able to do is, like we were saying, the same data that you've uploaded, it should be able to create export files for you in those different formats that you need it in. So there's,
Sorry, just to stop you there, because
course.
methodologies is a big word.
Yeah.
it's a large word. It scares people, right? So I wanted to paint a picture for people, right?
Yeah.
Like why are there different methodologies? Like what is your take on that? Like why are there
Yeah.
different methodologies?
Honestly, my take on this, and it keeps growing as as I work with these methodologies, and sometimes we even work with the people writing these methodologies. That everyone thinks, if you're in North America or you're in South America, and every country tries to come up with their own version of this. That's why the ISO standards are usually my favorite, because they're international.
I guess that's the I in the ISO.
That's the I in the ISO.
Yeah.
So otherwise, depending on what country you go to, each country is going to take their own shot at coming up with a methodology and how to measure these emissions. And so what I like to often ask clients, especially when they come to us with these methodologies that might be country specific, their question is always, can you do this? And is it similar to ISO or not? And more often than not, when you read the fine print, the majority of these methodologies, they cross-reference each other. And what that kind of means is that you might be reading a methodology that is for companies in Mexico, but if you read the fine print, you'll actually realize that this methodology is also referencing the ISO methodology that is at that international level. And what really ends up mattering is, how do you export the data just in the format for that given methodology, not that the math and the formulas are changing every single time.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think just so everyone knows, right, like these formats, methodologies, standards are somehow interlinked at times.
Exactly.
There could be a standard by an industry, for example, the BIFMA standard in the furniture industry
in the US,
right? And they are built on the ISO standards, but it is essentially a very curated version of the verbiage that industry uses, the way it creates a system boundary around what's included and what's not included.
Exactly.
Sometimes it could be led by a regulation, sometimes it could be led by an industry initiative. So the idea is to remain agile
Yeah.
The data that you use to create the calculation is still the same,
Yes.
but the formats are so contextual to the markets that you are selling in or buying in, or the regulations you have to abide by.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've started playing another video here, and just to showcase how easy it is to collect some of this data. This is just using data that is on a website publicly available, but of course, as a supplier, you're going to have better versions of this data. But here you see on the Arbor platform, the same data that you would need to manufacture your product. You're able to use that data to measure the footprint of your product live. And so we were talking about bill of materials, we were talking about utility bills for manufacturing, and that same data, once you've uploaded to the platform, is what the platform will map out for you so that you can measure your emissions. So I'm going to skip through a little bit because I want to show a very specific part.
Yeah,
Once it's all
while you get
wrapped
to the right part of the video,
Yeah.
I think the important part is that, if you were using a spreadsheet, right, instead of
Yes.
the Arbor platform or any software, right, let's just imagine that, you will be limited with having to figure out how to create emission footprint
Yes.
numbers and water impact or
Yes.
packaging waste, right, like, and then different formats and stuff like that. And that's been how the business world has been like for the
So
last
far,
20
yeah.
years. The one problem that it creates for people is that how many times can you do that if you're selling thousands of products, or
Yeah.
if you're buying from tens of thousands of suppliers? Like, we live in a world where, there's AI this, AI that,
Yeah.
I think that digitization has
Yeah.
the businesses have been always like the last ones to adopt the digitization
Definitely.
aspect. But this is the one aspect where they need to be able to use data that everyone else is using to make decisions about their business,
Yes.
right? So a lot of the suppliers I end up meeting with that are not providing carbon footprint data, but they're just providing their bill of materials
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
company, right? I just wanted to touch on that perspective because I feel like they don't know what is happening to their business when they provide that data, because
Yeah.
that retailer or that customer is just going to make decisions without you knowing, and you
Yes.
not knowing how bad or good you were.
Exactly.
And that is a black box that I do not recommend any business owner to be in.
Yeah. So to your point, it's very important to understand, what are they doing with the data that you provide, and how does the bill of materials and these other data sources that you're providing, how do they translate over to emissions? So I'm on the right screen now, and so what you can see here on the platform is once you've uploaded that data, whether that's for one product, whether that's for thousands of products, what you're getting is not just the total number, so not just what is the total number of emissions for my product, but also the breakdown of those emissions. And if you as a supplier can provide this data to your customers, that's where they're going to start seeing more and more value from you around not just the number, but how you're showing how you can reduce that number. So in this example, what you're seeing here is a hotspot, what we like to call a hotspot analysis in this industry, where you're able to hover over and figure out which materials might be the majority of your emissions, which manufacturing processes might be the majority of your emissions. And if you provide this data to your customer, what you can add to that is also your willingness as well as your ability to reduce these emissions by one common example that I see often is, for example, recycled scraps. And I think it's something that all manufacturers have access to.
Yes.
And something.
And you're talking about the
personally.
manufacturing waste, right? Like,
Exactly.
just so people who are not from the industry.
Yeah. Why don't you speak a little bit around how easy it is to also reduce these emissions? I think that's another thing that people find.
Yeah.
Oh, it's impossible and it's going to cost me all this money. It's the opposite.
This is the part where people's brains are a little bit like, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that we were talking about earlier was that a company like Amazon cannot be net zero without its packaging supplier
Exactly
reducing its emissions.
Yeah.
Because that will be the majority of Amazon's packaging related emissions. Yeah. And the supply chain activities that you're doing, one of them being manufacturing that packaging, is going to create waste it is going to use energy,
Yeah.
and there might be different materials it could be made out of, right? So again, it is not rocket science. If you think about just three things, you have
Yeah.
circularity, which
Yeah.
is taking waste. So if, let's say, I am trying to create 1 unit of a packaging item, and then 20% of it is what is the industry average right now in
Yeah.
manufacturing, is just waste.
Yeah.
So all the material you put in, 20% of it doesn't come out on the other side because, Newton's laws. But companies can
Yeah.
use that scrap, as you called it, or
Yeah.
waste,
Yeah.
as some would, generally categorize it, back into the production of newer products,
Yeah.
and continue using them. And they don't realize that that actually helps them reduce the
Exactly.
footprint of each unit by so
Yes.
much that Amazon could hit their 2030 target
Yeah.
if they did that, if their supplier did that, right?
Exactly.
And then their supplier could also say, hey, Amazon, I want to move to a renewable energy source, and then this is
Yes.
the all the energy that I'm consuming to make your product, right?
Yes.
And I've seen companies like Amazon take that first step and help their suppliers
Exactly.
get off the grid or get on renewable energy sources
Yeah.
because it ends up reflecting in their own book.
Yes.
And I can keep going on and on and on forever about
Yeah.
this stuff, right? But that's the kind of stuff that is made of the dreams of a supplier. Like they would love to have Amazon take a personal interest, because when they take that interest, they're not going away for the next 10 years at least, right? Your 7-year ROI of putting in new equipment has just found a justification that is so strong that your business can go levels above. And then, you know what?
Yeah.
And again, sorry if I'm going a little bit, I get too passionate
No.
about these things,
Go
but
ahead.
what do you think Walmart is going to want from a packaging supplier once you're done with Amazon, right? You don't need to stop there. If you have one major brand and your whole business and your revenue is tied to that, if you proactively help them, congratulations, because you have the information to get the next 10 Amazons, right?
Exactly.
And 10x your business, and not think of it as a, a game that you're always running with old school rules, because the rules are changing every day. And this is the one way to stand out, and it is going to be more and more important. Some industries you've already touched based on, it's already very popular, but I also think, as a fair warning to everyone, that you only have a couple more years to take advantage, because in a couple of years from now, this will be taught as a competitor differentiation strategy or how to get a cheaper loan strategy. And then everybody else would be doing it. And if the whole world was on the same page on it, then that would not be a competitive differentiation anymore. Competitive differentiation is what you can do today and earn their trust and be on the same path as they're going on.
To your point of, once they're locked into that contract with you,
yes,
it doesn't matter if 5 years down the road, now you're suddenly a lot better, right? They're working with that supplier.
They're committing to that supplier.
They're committing to that supplier. And on the supplier side, I think, to summarize what you said, it can actually be cheaper for you to reduce this footprint.
Exactly.
Not, that you're paying more and more money. And I think we've seen both of these examples with some of our customers.
Yeah, I would just advise everyone to do an ROI calculation as part of this initiative, and suddenly it will become the one thing that your marketing and sales team starts loving about it.
Yeah. I feel like sales teams are usually where we hear often these requests coming from, that, hey, our customers are asking, can we provide this data? Can we provide this data? And eventually it works its way up to the president.
And the president's like, why are we talking about sustainability again? Where is my sustainability guy?
Yeah.
How can he answer this and don't bother me again? But yeah, if you're that CEO, please take some time and understand it can really be the make it or break it moment for your business. I think, so kind of walking through the whole example, we have a few questions here. So let's just do a quick round of questions, and then we'll see if we have any more questions being asked in the chat itself.
Let's do it.
So first question, and I want you to be quick about this because I want people to get the answer. So if a company only has a couple of weeks before a reporting or client deadline, how fast can a product carbon footprint be completed by using Arbor?
So this is very important to me because I've been working on this, literally this week with a lot of customers.
This morning too.
This morning, a lot of customers that are under end of year deadline pressure. And on their side, as soon as they provide us the data, we try to get back to them with the product carbon footprint within that same week, if not the next day. And so the thing to highlight there is that this is not something that should take weeks, let alone months, especially when you're starting off with a few products. So you should be able to get back to your customers right away.
Perfect. Moving on to the next one,
Yep.
and we can reserve our opinions for the end. Once the product carbon footprint is calculated, what kind of an output do clients receive, and how can I share it with them?
Yeah, no, great question. So this goes back to what methodology or standard they might have requested, right? So if it's the case that let's take the Pact example. So Pact has a very specific Excel sheet that you need to fill out. They have all the different data fields that you need to fill out. And so when you're working with a solution provider, you want to make sure that whether it's on a spreadsheet or whether it's a software solution, that they can export that data in that specific Excel format that in this case Pact requires.
Interesting. And just to add a little bit,
Yeah.
we also provide a license for emission quantification statements. So if at any point anybody has any questions about it, it needs to get audited, any of that headache, it can be traced back into our system and we can answer all those questions on your behalf.
Yeah. And so let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Change.
Yeah, let's do it.
You were mentioning these different standards. In your opinion, do the solutions that these customers go with, how adaptable should they be to the growing calculation frameworks? Because like we were mentioning, every year I find new standard, new year, new standard.
Yeah. It's a great question. I've been trying to answer it for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I feel like history is the best fact I have behind that answer. So one quick, thought on that is like when the first companies 5 years ago, like, again, the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world were claiming we will be net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
I was trying to scream on top of my lungs, guys, the methodology that you're using to claim that you can get net zero,
not possible.
It cannot allow you, right? If imagine if 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in the methodology you're claiming it to be, how do you get to 4, right? Or should I say 2 - 2 is equal 0, right? But they had the 2 - unknown equals 0 type of methodology. So that's why when we created Arbor, I was so passionate about creating awareness for bottom-up calculations. It is the way that most methodologies are going. So bottom-up calculations means that it is grounded in supply chain activities. It is grounded in mass and energy-based type of data. And I know financials are very important to every business, but what translates to financials are what that data interprets at instead of using financials to drive carbon accounting. So that's why sometimes I don't like to use the word carbon accounting, because then it just puts people in this context that, it is about just putting dollars and then putting into a category and calling it at that. But it just removes all the uniqueness about something you could do. Like we talked about scrap or renewable energy and all these different things, and it just never gets accounted for the right way. So to adapt to methodologies, I would say keep that in mind, that it should be something that is viable for the future, and that is something that can always collect more data if available and be able to increase the accuracy of that calculation. If your methodology isn't allowing you to increase the calculation of your accuracy with more data, then it's not really a methodology, it's a template. And you would rather stay away from templates, because at this pace, every 3 months, every 3 years, like there's local updates, there's regional updates.
Can't treat it as a one-off.
You cannot treat it as a one-off. If Walmart says, I like methodology CBD, right? Anything random. You need to be able to be agile enough to fit in that format, right? And be able to make the differentiation between other competitors within that format.
I think we're seeing this today, where the people that wrote these methodologies 5 years ago are now updating them to reflect the actual way you can reduce these emissions.
Exactly. And that's what we were talking about with the SBTI standards, right? Like the whole thing was set on good faith reporting. And trust me, good faith is just a good thing to have, but it doesn't really like provide transparency. It doesn't build trust. And like the whole market is just waiting on some sort of a leadership, versus the data that will now be created with supply chain activities will be so transparent that it isn't really supply chain activity anymore.
Yeah.
It's value chain activity. It's what you do with your suppliers
Yeah.
instead of what you do with some university research paper that said this is what your supplier would have done, right? Because it takes away, like, the academia, and it brings in the real life. So it needs to
Yeah.
be grounded in real life. And I think the methodologies can be a headache to learn, to keep up
Yes.
with, and it just is somehow made out to be so complex. But that's what I tell everyone: if you understand the intent behind them,
Yeah.
then your data will be suited for not just this methodology but the next 10 methodologies to come.
Yeah. No, I think that's a perfect way to maybe wrap this up. I think we should maybe summarize. I feel like we talked about a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a supplier, why and how can you start getting prepared for these carbon requests that we're telling them are not going to stop?
And again, I go into my own upbringing to answer this. I grew up in the scope 3 of the world, and I mentioned that, which meant like there were more factories in my town than there were, big houses, because
Yeah.
that's what was powering the economy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, for people listening in, I grew up in this manufacturing town in Pakistan, grew up playing in factories, having dinners with these big suppliers, right? Like with my friends. A lot of them are now suppliers themselves who
Yeah.
are probably watching this. And I really understand the psyche behind it,
Yes.
right? Like that's what I was trying to explain. I know why you do what you do.
Yes.
And people will always blame you for being the source of the
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah.
And they will never give you the credit for
Yes.
being the person or the business that is providing what the world needs
Yes.
and making it. I think it's time for us to be smart. If you're a supplier anywhere in the world, I think your objective should be very simple. I think it's a very 3-step plan. First, try to figure out how to get a Walmart of the world.
Yeah.
And I can promise you the carbon data is going to help you stand out pretty
Yes.
easily. Step 2, get 10 more based on the same ideal customer profile. And step 3, be the best in your industry. So if you're a
Yes.
packaging supplier, figure out what are the best recycled
Yeah.
materials. If you figure out what's the best machinery,
Yeah.
figure out what those things are, that you can then keep it in the back of your mind. And then whenever Amazon or Walmart or anybody else is ready to bring in their A game and they're asking for their suppliers, you should be the voice in that room saying, it is possible, and I am the one who will do it for you. And it will help you stand out in the market so much more easily and for many more decades to come. And it can be a make it or break it for all the hard work that you've done so far. So please
Yeah.
don't let it go to waste.
Yeah.
And it is something that you can intertwine in your procurement, in your sales, in your marketing and customer success. And it will be something that is going to get more and more important, and it'll phase out a lot of players who are not willing to adapt.
Yeah. I think we're both very passionate, and it's very close to us to help suppliers. And
Yeah.
I think suppliers they're ready. They have the data that they need. And so if you're a supplier that is facing this similar pressure, please feel free to message either me or Abdullah. We're happy to give some of our time just to chat and figure out how we can help.
Yeah, there's always more time for us to talk to more suppliers. And because without you, the world can never achieve net zero. That's pretty much the last message I want to send people home with.
Nice. Thanks, Abdullah. This was great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. And hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of these and sharing our knowledge with just the benefit of the economy, and hope to drive more supply and demand using carbon instead of complaining about it.
It's a perfect way to end it.
All right. And then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or over email. I'd be happy to answer anything within your context. And thank you so much for taking out the time and joining Omer and I today. I wish you a great rest of your week. And hopefully you'll be thinking about carbon all day now. All right. Bye.